Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
In the late 1500s and early 1600s, one of the centers of the Jewish world was small and rather isolated, but it was Tzfat, Israel, in northern Israel, today a small city. And it became, when I say the center of the Jewish world, because it was the center of Jewish mystical thinking. Some famous rabbis wrote important tracts, but also, besides writing philosophical treatises on mysticism, being spiritually inclined, they thought that the Sabbath evening service should have a prelude called Kabbalat Shabbat, so that you spiritually got ready to really enter into Sabbath prayer. And the Kabbalat Shabbat that exists to this day comes from that time and that place. And two of the beautiful songs that we sing till today to welcome the Shabbat come from that time and place. Typically, as you know, we sing Lecha Dodi. But the other beautiful song, which we sing a little less frequently, is Yedid Nefesh. The Cantor opened the service this evening with a nigun, a wordless melody connected to Yedid Nefesh. And now, to welcome Shabbat, we'll look at the full hymn itself on page 332. If you look at the English translation, you'll see that it's a very spiritual song that calls God Yedid Nefesh. You could translate that as friend of my soul or even soulmate, because the mystics were very intent on coming as close to God as could be. So now we'll take the melody of the nigun and put it with some of the words of Yedid Nefesh.
Page 332, we'll be working with the top system of words.
Oh
beautiful welcome song of Shabbat, our call to worship, we flip back to the beginning of our book, page 28, the Baruch Hu. Please rise. Please be seated as we officially welcomed a new season, spring this week, on page 31. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of the tide of time and light, you guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Baruch atah Adonai, Hama'ariv Aravim. From the world around us to the world of Ahavat Olam, eternal love within us, page 32. Let's join together in the Shema and the V'ahavta, page 34. Yisrael, Adonai, Eloheinu, Adonai, Echad, Baruch Shem
לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, ושיתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להות על ידך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך
ובישעריך,
למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי,
והייתם
קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
Pesach is now less than 2 weeks away, and I had a funny exchange with Virginia Gitter, who might be tuning in from Portland, for all I know right now. And we had set the capacity for our Pesach Seder on the second night at 40, and she told me earlier in the week, well, we're one short. We have 39. And I said, no, we're right there. How about Elijah? Actually, we now have 40 physical souls for that, and we're looking forward to Pesach in our home and in the congregation. But actually, we think about the liberation of Pesach every week, not just once a year, when we sing the next prayer, Mi Chamocha, on page 40, because it's the words that our ancestors sang at the moment of their freedom. Also about the next prayer, the Hashkivenu prayer on page 42. The melody that we sing most often was composed by Craig Taubman, a contemporary composer, probably now a few decades ago, but it really became popular at the Jewish summer camps, and then congregations began singing it. Well, the Cantor was telling me that there's a newer setting to this Hashkivenu prayer, which is very popular at the Jewish summer camps. And in fact, one of our campers who has a bat mitzvah coming up in just a few weeks, she actually requested from the Cantor that we start to add this Hashkivenu into the mix as well. So we're going to do that for a few weeks, see how we like it. The name of the composer is
Josh Zweiback.
Josh Zweiback, and here's his setting to Hashkivenu. I think there's some potential there. It's pretty. We'll have to get used to it. But the one that we often sing is a very favorite one. So we'll have to, balance it out. I think that the melody to the next prayer on page 44 is quite known.
Vayom hashvish Shabbat vayinafash, Shabbat vayinafash, Shabbat vayinafash.
We are a people in whom the past endures, in whom the present is inconceivable without moments gone by. The Exodus lasted a moment enduring forever. What happened once upon a time happens all the time. For the Tefillah prayer, page 46, we rise. Please be seated. From time to time, we read a very powerful, in my opinion, prayer in English, written several decades ago by a Reform rabbi. On page 55, it's so different, so unlike the tenor of most of our prayers, and it's a very challenging one. I would even call it prophetic in spirit. So let's read this responsively by paragraph. Disturb us, Adonai, ruffle us from our complacency. Make us dissatisfied with the peace of ignorance, the quietude which arises from a shunning of the horror, the defeat, the bitterness, and the poverty, physical and spiritual, of humans.
Shakas Adonai, deny to us the false Shabbat, which gives us the delusions of satisfaction amid a world of war and hatred.
Wake us, O God, and shake us from the sweet and sad poignancies rendered by half-forgotten melodies and rubric prayers of yesteryears.
Make us know that the border of the sanctuary is not the border of living, and the walls of your temples are not shelters from the winds of truth, justice, and reality.
Disturb us, O God, and vex us. Let not your Shabbat be a day of torpor and slumber. Let it be a time to be stirred and spurred to action. Baruch atah Adonai Mikadesh HaShabbat. I chose this reading tonight in light of some disturbing things that I'll be talking about a little bit later, but it's also very appropriate this evening to end the Amidah with the prayer of peace that in the English rendition, interpretive rendition from the Old Union Prayer Book, is also a prayer for our country, and that's the Grant Us Peace prayer on page 61. As some of you know, this musical setting is from our past cantorial student, Iris Carlin.
Grant us peace, you most precious gift, eternal source of peace, and give us the will to proclaim its message to all the peoples of the earth. Bless our country, that it may always be a safeguard of peace. Bless our country and its advocates among the nations. May contentment reign within our borders, health and happiness within our homes. Strengthen the bonds of friendship and fellowship among all the inhabitants of every land. Bless our country, that it may always be a safeguard of peace. Bless our country and its advocates among the nations. The love of your name handle every home and every heart. Praise our eternal one, who blesses our people with shalom.
And a little reminder that Iris Carlin will be teaming up with classmate Joe Flaxman next week, conducting the Shabbat morning service together at the Shabbaton for the three congregations at Temple Sinai. Next Shabbat morning, we are looking forward to that. At the end of the Amidah, our thoughts turn to those of our loved ones now in need of healing. be this a healing of body and the healing of soul. We continue to name Kurt Roberg in our prayers for healing, as well as those you call to mind as we join with the Cantor in our healing prayer.
Of strength, bless the ones before us. Help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, bless those in need of healing with refuah shelema.
As we prepare to pause now for a few moments of our own silent prayer, this week we begin a new book of the Torah in the annual Torah cycle reading, and that is the book of Leviticus. It's all about sacrifices, and I'm called upon to explain it to our B'nai Mitzvah students who have very often spring B'nai Mitzvah and are reading from this book of Leviticus. It's the biggest theme of the book, and one of the things I point out is that there's three essential kinds of sacrifices that also reflect the purposes of prayer, which the rabbis call the sacrifice of the heart, which eventually supplanted the physical sacrifices of the biblical era. But the first kind is what I call the thank you sacrifice. Just like one of the primary purposes of prayer is just to be thankful and to give thanks. There's a todah sacrifice that was simply to express gratitude. A second type of sacrifice was the petition sacrifice, to ask for something, whatever it might be, for yourself, for your family, for your community, for the world. Our tradition teaches don't ask for something until you said thank you. So the thank you sacrifice is first, the petitionary sacrifices, and the third type of sacrifice was the I'm sorry sacrifice. The Torah is very adamant that we all make mistakes. We can relate to that. Small mistakes, big mistakes. Leaders make small mistakes, make big mistakes. And in the biblical mind, you brought sacrifices to try to bridge that gap between you and God after mistakes had been made. And the way to do that was to say you're sorry and to offer that kind of sacrifice as well. So as we pause now, we think about all three, actually. How can we express through our means of prayer, rather than physical sacrifice, thanks, petition, plea, and I'm sorry, an expiation for the mistakes that we all make. We pause. The key word of that song, yachad, means together. When we're not together in our families, our community, or our country, we're disturbed. From time to time, you know that I pose the question, what keeps you up at night? And the thing is, for most of us, it's personal dissonance, personal conflict. It's something having to do with our relationship to somebody in our family, immediate family or extended family. That's understandable, that's natural. However, there are things that keep us up at night, or at least some of us, in our national lives as well, in our civic lives. I've told people that a lot has kept me up, especially since November of 2016. And from time to time, I'll read something or come across or have a conversation that will then keep me up. And so I feel a need to talk about it. You're my captive audience. And so what's kept me up this week is a term and a radical discussion that has entered the national discourse very recently. It's a term that some people I've talked to have come across, some people haven't even heard it yet. But it's not going away, and you will be hearing it. The term is national divorce. How many of you have come across that phrase in the last few weeks? Some, not all. The phrase is being bandied about by a far-right member of the House of Representatives named Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's not the only person using this phrase. It has been talked about in far-right circles for some time now. She has brought it, because of her profile, to national attention. What does it mean? We know what the term means in a family setting. What does national divorce mean? It really is a discussion of secession, of a new kind. It's a phrase that is advocating that the nation is divided up between red states and blue states, and that each should go its own separate way. That the United States should actually become a confederation, two confederations of blue states and red states that have separate governances, separate standards, and the argument being made is that we shouldn't make one live with the other. The people who talk about this secession say this is not a call to civil war. But David French, the noted columnist, wrote a piece this week in which he says, the very idea is dangerous and absurd. It's incompatible with our national constitution. It's dangerous, it's unworkable, it would destroy our economy, dislocate millions of Americans, and destabilize not only this country, but the globe. National separation would almost certainly be a violent mess, he says. And he's actually written several books on the subject of a national discord already. He said, there's only one way to describe an actual American divorce, an unmitigated disaster for America and the world. But then he says, it could also happen. It's not likely, but it's not impossible, and we should be taking that possibility seriously. I know we have a tendency to say, I have enough to worry about in my life, and enough that keeps me up at night. So I don't need this as well. That's one way of dealing with it. But 2 points to be made that regard that approach. The first is to learn some history. And it was emotional rhetoric like this, deeply emotional rhetoric that nearly destroyed our country once before. The Civil War did not break out because people talked civilly. The South actually became hysterical about the abolitionist movement and felt even further that their way of life and their very existence was being threatened by that. The second point is, how do we even talk about dividing the country in such a way when in every red state there are blue cities and blue counties, and in every blue state there are red towns and red cities, but we're the United States. And for certain people to suggest that we don't have a future as the United States, that's frightening. You know, that keeps us up at night. So no sooner had I finished reading this particular essay than I saw that there's a new book out by a distinguished investigative journalist. The title of the book is going to tell you something right now. It's brand new. It's called The Undertow by Jeff Sharlet. The Undertow is the title. You know what the subtitle is? Scenes from a Slow Civil War. Jeff Sharlet decided to spend a year of his life with the far right in America. He kind of embedded himself in the political gatherings of the far right in this country. And I have not yet read the book, it's brand new, but I read excerpts and a review. And if you're scared now, after reading what he uncovers, you'll be even further unsettled. And I'll just quote one paragraph from Jeff Sharlet, S-H-A-R-L-E-T. He said, I used to decline to characterize the threat to our republic as fascism. Yet, one by one in recent years, objections to describing the militant Trumpism as fascist have fallen away. In addition to the personality of cult, the cult of personality, the movement of that presidency quickened now cultivates paramilitary and glorifies violence as a means of purification, thrives on othering the enemy, declares itself persecuted, and diagnoses the nation as decadent and embraces the revisionist myth of a MAGA past. He believes that our disintegration has begun and that attempts to reunify the country must begin now. And finally, he and others point to the fact that the most dangerous threat may not be the overt violence, although the past president of the United States last night sent out on social media a paragraph that said potential death and destruction may occur if I am indicted, and then called the Manhattan District Attorney a degenerate psychopath that truly hates the United States of America. That's dangerous, dangerous rhetoric. But what may be most dangerous of all is one more thing that you may or may not be familiar with, and that's something called the independent state legislative theory. What the independent state legislative theory, a school of thought, a radical school of thought, is that a literal reading of the Constitution gives the legislatures in each state the right, if they see fit, to overturn the will of the people. If they judge an election in their mind to be tainted or rigged or invalid, it gives the legislators the right to appoint the electors and to overturn the will of the democratic will of the people. How close did we come to a vice president of the United States being asked to overturn and declare invalid an election? How close did we come on that January 6th? Thomas Jefferson said the price of democracy is eternal vigilance. Those words ring as true today as they did when he declared them 275 years ago. A few years ago, he's now passed away, I happened to hear John Lewis speak at a rabbinical convention. And he said, my whole life has been dedicated, and I want to leave you with this message. Make some noise. He said, if something is happening, raise your voices. Don't put it out of your mind. United we stand, divided we fall. Yachad, let's proceed together, Yachad, as the United States of America. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
We open the ark for the Aleinu prayer, the concluding segment of our service. The bottom of page 282. Please rise.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצא בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגור עלינו ככל המונם. אנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד ארץ, ומשה יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגובה מרומים. הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, בידד היום בהשבות אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא אלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד ונמל.
As we remain standing, our thoughts turn to those of our loved ones no longer with us. I want to mention an unusual yortzeit first. Thanks to Doris White, who reminds us that tomorrow is the anniversary of a great tragedy for the Jewish community and for America, the Triangle Fire of March 25th, 1911, when 146 primarily Jewish women from the Lower East Side lost their lives. And each year, Doris says Kaddish for one of those individuals, Sarah Weintraub, who was 17 years old, 17, and lived at 186 Ludlow Street in the Lower East Side. Each year she's part of what's called the Triangle Fire Chalk Project. She goes down to the Lower East Side and each person draws in chalk and then writes the name of one of the victims. And she mentioned that she'll be going down with her grandchildren to help her do that this year. On this Shabbat, we also remember those recently taken from our midst in the last 30 days, the Shloshim, Vince Priblo, husband of Jody, father of Justin, Dylan, and Matt, Myra Ann Schuldman, sister of Annette DeMarco, and the yortzeit of James David Avidan, father of Scott Avidan. For all those close to our hearts, for all those for whom there may be no one to say Kaddish, we join in the Kaddish prayer on page 294. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabba, be'alma tivrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'hayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala uv'zman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehei shmei Rabba mevorach le'olam ulamei almaya, yitbarak v'yishtabak v'yitpa'ar yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yithaleh v'yit'ala shemei t'kudisha b'reichu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbekata v'nechamata, da'amiran v'alma v'imru Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru Amen.
Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom.
Please be seated. I invite forward our president for greetings and announcements.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Rabbi, for that most sober sermon. And if you are having trouble falling asleep, I'll send you over some of my tax newsletters. You'll go right out. And thank you, student Cantor Joe Flaxman, once again for introducing new melodies to a very old congregation. 151-year-old congregation, and you're introducing new melodies, and we appreciate that. Thank you very much. The Torah study will not be meeting, we'll meet tomorrow, we'll meet tomorrow for the final session, but that is the final session because you have 6 straight weeks of B'nai Mitzvahs.
After Pesach.
I don't think that's ever happened in
All lined up, yeah.
yeah. The Adas Emuno Book Club will be meeting via Zoom on Monday, May 8th. And the book club is reading Dinner with Ruth by Nina Totenberg. And everyone is invited to join our book club, which focuses on Jewish themed books. And I think at the book club, Barbara Schwartz will reveal the nickname of given to Ruth Bader Ginsburg in high school by her friends, which included Barbara Schwartz, of course. The big Shabbaton with Temple Sinai and Temple Emeth will be held on Saturday, April 1st, as you know, at Temple Sinai. There's an education portion in the morning discussing the Talmudic sage Rabbi Elisha ben Abuya, and at 10:30, 10:30, be there, led by our student cantors Joe Flaxman and Iris Collin, will have a Shabbat service, and that is something to look forward to. Also lunch, something to look forward to, following that service. A high point of the Shabbaton begins at 7:30 in the evening with the performance of the play As a Driven Leaf, based on the historical novel discussed in the morning. And that play was written by our own Rabbi Barry Schwartz. It's only been performed once, and that was at the largest temple in the United States, and the name escapes me. Temple Emmanuel, thank you. The Shabbaton is free, but registration is required. The best way to register is to email Rabbi Schwartz, and many in our community have already registered. We're getting good turnouts for things, yes. As you know, we're bringing back the second night Passover Seder this year. We've reached our maximum capacity of 40 attendees, and I want to give a big thank you to Virginia, who is coordinating the Seder from a home in Portland, Oregon. Most people do it from their kitchens. She can do it from 3,100 miles away. Pretty good. The Nitwits will be getting together on Monday, March 27th at 7 p.m. in the social hall. The Nitwits, of course, are a group that knit scarves, teddy bears, all sorts of nice things, and give it to people who will really appreciate it. And we get letters from recipients that are quite beautiful. Our Social Action Committee, led by Annette DeMarco, is collecting all types of non-perishable foods beginning in April and May, and baby diapers are still very much in demand. The rest of this month is devoted to canned vegetables and fruits. Tonight's Oneg is sponsored by Emily and Scott Avedon in memory of Scott's father, James Avedon. I had the privilege of working with James Avedon in a tiny, tiny role when he directed Barnum at Leonia High School. Once again, we thank Dylan Priblo for live streaming tonight's service on YouTube. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Michael, may we ask what the role was? Was it juggling?
Well, service and juggling.
Yes, very nice. We conclude our service, and then, of course, we'll convene downstairs for the Kiddush and the Hamotzi. The words, the song is not in your prayer book, but let's sing at least the words Yachad, which means together. It's the same song that we did after the silent prayer. It seems most appropriate for this evening.
Yachad lev el lev, together heart to heart.